Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with the illegitimate use of force by government. To develop a truly free society, the issue of initiating force must be understood and rejected.
What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, January 6th, 2026. Matt Ho will be with us in just a moment on the dangers of military adventurism, like what we all just saw in Caracas. But first this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure. And that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Matt, welcome here, my dear friend. Belated Happy New Year to you, notwithstanding what's going on in the world. Is the United States likely to be viewed as a rogue state willing to use brute force to achieve its hegemony?
Well, Happy New Year to you, Judge. Good to see you. And I'm going to just say, wow, what a great new opening you have for the show. Gave me, I got chills a bit.
You can thank Chris and Ron Paul for it.
Right. But, I think this idea of the United States as a rogue state, certainly whether it's being said out loud or just behind closed doors, is something that the world is reckoning with. It has been this way for many decades, but certainly the reality of the United States now as an empire with an emperor who is willing to do what he wants as he wants without any pretense. I think that is something that is so spectacular, if you will, about the actions of the last weekend. This kidnapping of a foreign head of state is not just the brazenness or the naked aggression behind it, but the lack of apology. There is no discussion from the administration about the evils of socialism. There's no discussion about the need to provide democracy for the Venezuelan people. There's no discussion about the immiseration or privations of the Venezuelan people. We're not going there to rescue them. We're not going there to civilize them. We're not going there to improve them, which was a hallmark of all previous empires, as well as what our own country would say. If you look at what George W. Bush said about going into Iraq, or Barack Obama about escalating the war in Afghanistan, even the airstrikes and the regime change operations in Libya or Syria, it was all with this wrapping around it that had these ideals, right? These lofty ambitions, or at least excuses or apologies for why it was being done. Here, it's just simply about the oil. And so while I guess it could be taken as refreshing, the honesty, We don't have to try and cut through the nonsense, the lies, the farce that this is about the evils of socialism or bringing democracy to a people or any of that nonsense. We just have to deal with the fact that this is the reality of the United States empire. It will do as it wish when it wants to. And we've said this many times before, Judge, that, we talk about the United States empire being in decline, and the idea that when an empire is in decline, it may be at its most dangerous point. And hence the phrase, that I like to attribute to this period of time, a dying mule kicks hardest. And I think we're just beginning to see the kicks that the American empire under Donald Trump and his successors will administer as the United States empire continues to decline.
What were you thinking? And I'm going to guess you were going back to your experiences in Afghanistan and Iraq. If I recall correctly, you were in both campaigns, so to speak. But what were you thinking when you heard Trump say, we're going to run Venezuela? This is just one of the more bizarre things to come out of the mouth of somebody who says bizarre things every day.
I was wondering where Jerry Bremer was at the moment, and if he was.
All right, remind us about Governor General or whatever his title was, Bremer, Commissioner, whatever they called him.
Right. For people who are not familiar, L. Paul Bremer, or Jerry Bremer, as he went by, was the administrator, the proconsul, the governor general, the viceroy, again, whatever you want to call him, for the American administration in Iraq from 2003 to 2004. This is when the Department of Defense effectively ran Iraq under what was called the Coalition Provisional Authority, CPA, and Jerry Bremer was the boss. And this idea that we are going to run Iraq, I can't even say Venezuela without saying Iraq first, Judge. Right? Yeah. I mean, like the parallels here are obvious. What they actually have planned, if they have anything planned at all. What we're seeing right now, I think we're all working off of speculation. The best we can get is comments from Stephen Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff / Homeland Security advisor, talking to CNN yesterday, saying how what it means that we're going to run Venezuela, it's to paraphrase him, it means that we're going to have an armada off the coast and they're going to do what we say because we have power. Then he went into some soliloquy about how history has always been written by those with the iron and the steel and willing to shed blood, et cetera, et cetera. This fantasy that these men and women have about ruling as if there's some type of long forgotten conquerors or something. I don't know, but I don't know, Judge, if they actually have any plans for how to administer this. We're uncertain about what's actually happening in Venezuela. The speculation, at least from my observation, is that the Venezuelan government was co-opted, that the Venezuelan government turned on Maduro in return for giving up Maduro. They kept themselves in power. The United States saw this as essentially a turnkey operation. The quid pro quo was that you give us the oil, you stay in control. And essentially, is this what we're looking at? Is essentially you're going to have this country run by the presence of American ships with cruise missiles capable of launching drones with Hellfire missiles, always the threat of a Delta Force or Navy SEAL execution squad coming ashore to either, again, execute someone or kidnap someone. And is that what it means to run? And whoever doesn't do what the United States want, the Chevron and ExxonMobil and all the rest don't get what they want, then that person will be replaced by force, and someone who's willing to do it will be put in that position. Is that what we're looking at here? Because I don't really see what else is there. In terms of resistance coming from the Venezuelans, we've seen mixed signals. A lot today about how these Venezuelan military and the paramilitary forces were out on the street, checkpoints, checking people's phones, going through their papers. But does that mean they're looking for the people who helped in this raid to kidnap Maduro, or are they just looking to suppress any opposition that might arise to the new status quo, to the new reality, to the new government in Venezuela, which is not a new government. It's the same exact government, just with a different person in the biggest chair. So, I think going forward, what can come from this, the unintended consequences. This is a war, whether or not people like to understand it that way. It wasn't a pitched battle with divisions and regiments fighting one another, but this certainly is a war, in the idea of a political outcome achieved by the use of force by one state upon another.
Here's how Donald Trump described the amount of force that was there and the success with which they operated. Chris?
The United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II.
He looked terrible there, but this may have been in the middle of the night. I don't know exactly when he said it, or it may have been at noon the next day. But his parenthetical, an assault the likes of which people haven't seen since World War II, hyperbole, or is there some merit to that?
I'm not really sure what parallel he's trying to bring about, Judge, other than maybe in his mind, the clear victory here, right? That we haven't had a victory, a United States military and political victory in a war, in a conflict with another state since World War II. And maybe that's what Donald Trump is saying, that no one has been successful since Truman. And I'm that guy. I don't know. I do want to bring up one point about the idea of how this is in keeping with his foreign policy, his militarized foreign policy, and what we expect going forward. And I just want to paraphrase what Karen Kiyotowski says, and Karen's on, I know, a lot of times after me, and so just to credit her with this, that this administration's foreign policy is effectively profit-seeking, cronyism, and deceitful wars. And this hits that to a T, and I expect that's essentially what the hallmark of the next 3 years will be to try and replicate this, quote, success, unquote. And, of course, easy to talk about all the dangers that are going to come from that.
We'll talk about the dangers in a minute, but here's Trump talking about his own foreign policy at different times. Chris, cut number 7.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. Our current strategy of nation building and regime change is a proven absolute failure.
We will break the cycle of regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change that Hillary Clinton pushed in Iraq, in Libya, in Egypt, and in Syria. Regime change takes chaos. You've seen how that works over the last 20 years. That hasn't been too good.
Not a reckless interventionist globalism.
We're getting out of the nation-building business. We're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place.
It's gone 180 degrees.
Well, we're not even at the point where you can say his warnings about nation building haven't come true. We're only in the first days of this thing. Certainly look at the first days of Iraq, look at the first days of Afghanistan, look at, say, the first 6 months. I recall vividly, it's a story I always share. The New York Times in October of 2011, after Gaddafi was killed, front page major story about how Libya is now ripe for Western investment. So in the early days, things are often very good. Things seem to be going the way the plan said it was going to go. And then to quote Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And what's the punch in the face going to be here, Judge? Right? What is going to occur? What happens if we are wrong and the government in Venezuela didn't turn on Maduro, that Rodriguez and company didn't sell him out, and that they actually are going to resist? what's going to happen then? How is the United States going to make this good? How are Trump and Rubio and Hegseth and Waltz, et cetera, going to save face on all this, let alone deliver to all of the oil companies that have been promised, as well as all the other ancillary parasitic industries that will join in on this, the spoils of this victory. I think you probably saw this, Judge, that the president informed the oil companies about this upcoming operation, but he didn't inform Congress. I mean, that's who the real constituency is here. And so what happens 3 months now, 6 months now, when that's not being delivered? When the spoils, the fruits of this victory aren't achieved? What is the United States going to do? You can certainly blockade the country, but the country's been essentially under blockade for years now. You could turn off the minimum of oil that it is exporting, and that will hurt. It will cause real pain, but is that going to bring the government down? And so what then is the United States going to do come July or August? Or the other options here are that say there is an insurgency or resistance. I mean, one of the things about this is that the betrayal happened on so many levels to so many different groups within Venezuela. So the opposition that thought the United States was going to come in and put them in charge, right? So the camps behind Machado and Gonzalez, et cetera, they thought the United States was going to come in, get rid of Maduro and the government and put the opposition in power. They feel betrayed right now. As well, then, too, those within the government, those who backed Maduro, who pledged him their lives, who really maybe do believe in the Bolivarian revolution and its principles, they're looking at Rodriguez and Cabello and all those others who are still in power as being traitors, as having committed treason. So the dangers of a civil war here, some type of explosion, politically, violent political explosion in Venezuela is very real. What's the administration going to do then? Well, he's going to roll Stephen Miller out to talk to Jake Tapper again and talk all tough and act like he's a big man, because he's about iron and steel, and because he gets to claim credit for Delta Force killing 80 Venezuelan military personnel and Cubans essentially in their sleep, murdered those guys in cold blood, essentially. If anyone thinks there's actual real firefights occurring, probably some, but I think most of those who were killed in the Venezuelan security detail were killed in cold blood, were murdered in their sleep by us dropping bombs on them. You know what I mean? So, what happens when there's actually something really to contend with here? What happens when your collaborators are taken out of positions of power by a Venezuelan resistance, by a Venezuelan population, whether it be in opposition or those who were loyal to Maduro or some other faction that we're not even identifying at this point? What happens then, Mr. Trump? What happens then, Mr. Miller? What happens then, Mr. Rubio? What are you going to do? And how are you going to deliver?
These are great observations. What happens to the United States negotiating around the world? I mean, who would take the United States seriously? It doesn't comply with its international commitments. The UN Charter, drafted by the United States, ratified by the U.S. Senate, was intended to prevent this very thing from happening. One country in the UN attacking another country in the UN unjustly, immorally, and illegally.
And that's the law of the land, Judge, right? Our Constitution says that treaties that we enter into are the law of our land. That's the same as violating an American law. And the UN Charter, for those who are out there who poo-poo this, I saw conservative commentators, MAGA commentators. Again, I'm harping on Stephen Miller again because he just said it again in this, viral interview he did with Jake Tapper. They call international law weak. They call it fanciful. They call it, something done by men and women who've never accomplished anything in their lives, et cetera, belittling it. When the reality was international law, the UN Charter, it was created, it was put in place, it was established by the men who won World War II.
Correct.
You're talking about the generals of the American and Soviet armies that defeated the Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. They are the reason why we have this UN Charter. And so who is Donald Trump or Stephen Miller or Marco Rubio to say that somehow those men weren't tough enough, that they don't understand the realities of the world, that they don't understand iron and steel and so forth? So this is infuriating because we can see where we're going with this. And in terms of this idea that we are building a fortress America, that the Dunroe Doctrine is going to isolate, shouldn't say isolate, it's going to essentially wall off the United States from predation outside of this hemisphere. There are some things that are attractive in that philosophy. I think it was Goldman Sachs this weekend, Judge, put out an estimate that if the United States does run Venezuela, and we essentially run Guyana, which is next door to Venezuela, the United States, with its own oil reserves, would have essentially 1/3 of the world's oil reserves. And so you can see that in the heads of these men and women who are running our government, this idea, well, we have 1/3 of the world's oil reserves. What do we need anyone else? And if we can have all the lithium and all the coltan and all the other rare earth minerals and metals that are resident throughout South America, then what do we need to worry about Africa or the Middle East or Asia? We have everything we need right here. And from here on this fortress, we can then dominate the rest of the world. That's what they're thinking here. This idea that somehow America is retreating, or that this new national security strategy that the Trump administration unveiled back in November or December, whenever that was, somehow signifies isolationism. No, it's this idea of repurposing or repositioning the American empire so that it can dominate against peers and against organizations like BRICS that have arisen over the last couple of years, or last, not a couple of years, but a couple of decades. So, I mean, there is a method to their madness, but they're so vainglorious, they're so arrogant, they're so ahistorical, and they possess such a degree of what was called chicken hawk ism. I don't know if that's a real ism or not, but we'll make it for this. That you saw possessed, right? In men like George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, John Bolton. These are essentially the same characters as these men. Joe Biden, Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, all these others who feel it's appropriate to shed someone else's blood to cause some family someplace, whether they're American or foreign, to sacrifice in order for their gain. So what we're looking at here, is essentially an empire, again, that has shed any pretense of having a feeling as if it needs to make an excuse, offer up an apology, provide some type of moral narrative or structure to define or validate what they're doing. They just believe in themselves. And I'll say the same thing to everyone what Larry Wilkerson said to me years ago when we were talking about these types of things. And Larry said, read Senator William Fulbright's The Arrogance of Power. And it's essentially the same thing, Judge. What you have here is you have power mistaking itself for virtue. And that's what you see when you see people like Rubio, Hegseth, Miller, Trump, et cetera, talking.
Tell me if you think there was any Mossad connection to the invasion on Saturday. And before you answer, here's, his title is The American Ambassador to Israel. He speaks like he's the Israeli ambassador to the United States. My former Fox colleague, the Reverend Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Chris, number 8.
Well, my first reaction, Rob, was to say, praise the Lord and thank you, President Trump. A lot of people may not make the connection as to why this matters to us in the Middle East. What they don't know is that Hezbollah is very active in Venezuela. The ties are deep, and Hezbollah operates in 12 different countries throughout South America. It is not just a threat in the Western Hemisphere. It is a threat to the Middle East. So for the president to go after Venezuela not only deals with narco-terrorism and the many deaths of Americans who are killed by the poison of drugs, it is going to make life for those of us living in the Middle East much better, much safer to take Maduro out, to recognize that Hezbollah is active here, targeting not just Jewish people in all over South America, but using those tentacles to ultimately reach into the United States. This is good news for America, good news for the world.
Had you ever heard that Hezbollah was targeting Jewish people in Latin America or the United States?
In the early 80s, Judge, so you're going back more than 40 years now, there were 2 attacks, I believe, on a synagogue and a community center. It may have been the Israeli consulate. Off the top of my head, I'm not remembering exactly. But in the early 80s, so again, more than 40 years ago, you had these two attacks on Israeli/Jewish targets in Argentina that were connected to Hezbollah. That's it. That's essentially where any act, ends, or any connection ends in terms of actual action on the ground. There has been this motif, this theme, this fever dream that Hezbollah is all throughout the world, but is, operating not just in southern Lebanon, but in Africa and Asia, but most especially here as having these sleeper cells all throughout the Western Hemisphere, just waiting for Hezbollah's real boss, the Ayatollah in Tehran, to snap his fingers, and they're going to hop into action and burn down synagogues and blow up shopping malls and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all complete nonsense. It's all garbage. It's all just, again, it's a fever dream. It's a fantasy. I don't know if people like Huckabee are stupid enough to actually believe such things, or just cynical enough to keep this lie going. There are Middle Eastern, specifically Lebanese businessmen all throughout the Western Hemisphere doing business, conducting trade, carrying out commerce, doing what sane, decent, normal people do, unlike these monsters who are in power like Mike Huckabee. But Huckabee is seeing this as an opportunity, of course, to connect anything he can to Israel. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, Judge. There is actually a thing out there called the Isaac Accords, similar to the Abraham Accords, where it is Latin American nations signing on to have this relationship with Israel, essentially making sure that the United States knows that they are in line with their policies and won't vote against them at the UN, et cetera. Right. But it is just, just a way to try and connect everything back to the genocidal government in Tel Aviv in order to try and maintain support from that, as well as, you're talking about two powers that are domineering. That believe in their own pride.
Is or was Mossad on the ground in Caracas?
Oh, I have no idea, Judge. I don't know what their presence is like in the Western Hemisphere. I would suspect that the American presence is substantial. Venezuela has been a top tier priority for the American intelligence community through 5 presidential administrations now. Starting with the Clinton administration, and certainly then with the importance of the oil industry and the connections of the CIA into the fossil fuel industry, its long reach back, into South America, going back decades. I mean, the number of interventions, coups, disruptions, occupations, invasions by the United States throughout Latin America, numbers in the dozens upon dozens. Many countries have been invaded or couped or occupied or intervened in multiple times. So I don't know if the United States would need that type of support from the Mossad to carry out something like this. I think they probably have the CIA, which is a catastrophe around most of the world, as Timothy Weiner called it, their legacy of ashes. But they do have a substantial presence in the Western Hemisphere. And if the inducements were correct, they probably would be able to carry off something like this on their own.
I got to play a clip that you'll appreciate hearing. This is a young woman that I worked with at Fox. She's still there, and she sort of breaks from the Fox orthodoxy. She's a comedian. Her name is Kat Timpf. But you'll appreciate this, and you'll appreciate her getting right back at the anchor who's not happy with what she's saying. Chris, cut number 1.
You have to see how some people might be feeling a little bit of whiplash here, given that Trump spent 10 years railing against U.S.-led regime change war. His own director of intelligence, as recently as 2 months ago, was railing against regime change war, and then he does one. So
is this a regime change? The regime is still there, as far as I know. The vice president.
Let me get this straight. We go to a country, we capture their leader, we bomb it, and then we say, we run this country now. And that's not war. But when they say send cocaine over here that people are willingly snorting, that is war. For me personally, I'm not so confident that this is the one that this is not the regime change that's finally going to work the way we say it's going to work. I would not willingly go die for it. I would not willingly send my son to go die for it. So I would think it would be hypocritical of me to call for other people to have to send their.
I see your point.
Happy to hear her say that, and happy to see that my former employer is giving her the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, God bless her, Judge. I hope she continues to be allowed back on.
Well, I'm living proof that that doesn't always work out that way. But Matt, thank you very much. I just wanted to play that sort of happy clip at the end. I didn't want to play it at first. Chris talked me into it, and now I love it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and I think it's great because we're all sitting here thinking, are we on crazy pills? Am I? I turn on CNN or I look at what the Wall Street Journal is saying, and the way they talk about this, or God help me, and I don't encourage anyone else to do this, but if you feel like harming yourself, go and look up the statements from the Democratic House and Senate leadership on this, right? Just the vagueness, the cowardness, the cravenness, and the desire to keep themselves within the bounds of respectable imperial discourse, right? So this regime change, this war, all the conversation in DC is about semantics, or about the fact that the Congress wasn't talked to or consulted about this. It's not about the gross illegality. No one talks about the UN Charter. No one brings up the context of regime change. No one brings up the history of American intervention in Latin America. No one says, is this a good idea? What if A, B, or C happens? If you look at what Schumer says, Jeffries, but even Sanders or AOC, they all dance around this. And so we're sitting here thinking, my God, like I said, am I taking crazy pills? What the hell is wrong with us? And so I'm glad to see, there are people like that who are speaking that way on the mainstream corporate media. Again, I don't know how long she'll be on for. I'm reminded of one of the last times I was ever on Fox and Friends, I rolled my eyes at Brian Keelmead and the camera caught it, and I was never asked back on again. So,
jeez. Their loss. Matt, thank you very much for your time, as always. A great analysis, great sense of humor, my dear friend. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. Thanks, Judge. Happy New Year.
And the same to you. And the aforementioned Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski right here at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.